Hello. I think that I'm now live. So I'm starting my very first hosted live Instagram, and I can see that a couple of you have already joined me. So hello, nice to see you with me. I've got Monica, Elijah, Jane, and luckily we've got Dr. Joanna Ward. Now, what she needs to do now is request to join. Oh, I've got so many. Hello, everybody. It's so good to see you here with me tonight. We're going to have a really great discussion. To wait for Joe to request to join my live. There we are. View the request. Go. Let's hope this works. How are you all doing this evening?
Hi.
Here she is. Hi, Joe.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
Oh, you're looking lovely. You really are. Oh, my
Thank you.
goodness.
Feeling a lot better.
I'm sure. My goodness me. My heart.
Being felt. Thank you so much.
Right. So I'm so glad you're here. We're going to crack on. We've got lots of exciting. Look, we've got more than 50 people joined us already. Hello, everybody. Just press like and please do take a screenshot share if you're interested. We've got so much to go through with Joe tonight. As you know, the main topic of conversation is going to be Joe's recovery and what happened to her over the course of her infection, because she was really badly affected by COVID-19. But also we're going to be answering a lot of your questions, and also feel free to ask questions whilst we chat, and then I'll try and go through them all and see if we can answer them as well. So I've written down all the questions that I received beforehand, and I'm more than happy to answer or get Joe to answer any of the questions that you've got right now. So now, Joe, understandably, the first lot of questions that everybody had for you was about your own experience. So they were asking things like, where do you think you got the coronavirus infection from? How did it start? And how did you know when it started that it wasn't the flu? So let's start off with that.
Okay. Well, great questions. I mean, to be honest, I think it's impossible to know where I got COVID-19, and it would be totally futile, and I would never want to point fingers anyway. So I guess what we need to know, and you know this, Gemma, being a doctor as well, is that in the course of a day we can see 20 to 40 patients. It's not unusual at all, is it, to have that kind of high volume exposure to people over the course of a day, and that would of course increase our risk. We're also on a daily basis exposed to people who are coming to us with infectious diseases. So
you've had your own brush with that as well. I remember you telling us from when you were a younger doctor.
That's right. Yes. I mean, this is not the first time I've caught a nasty respiratory disease in my daily medical life. When I was a younger medic, in fact, I was 25 when this happened, but I was tending to two patients on a respiratory ward who had advanced pulmonary tuberculosis. So that's an infection of the lungs caused by a bacteria. And although I had appropriate PPE and these patients were being barrier nursed, several months later I developed night sweats and cough, and suddenly thought, hang on a minute, I think I know what this is. Went to my GP who didn't really think it was TB, and several months passed and I was being treated for a standard chest infection, and lo and behold, when I actually deteriorated, I had a nasty advanced pulmonary tuberculosis. So I guess the thing is, this can happen in the line of duty. We know this, and we look after patients who are unwell, and we do it because we serve our community and we serve our people. But equally, I know there's a lot of controversy around PPE at the moment, because we seem to have somehow outsourced our PPE, where, to other countries, presumably. So there's a shortage, but doctors deserve, particularly frontline doctors and healthcare workers, deserve to be protected as much as possible, because if you don't protect your healthcare workers and key workers and frontline workers, they will be your next casualty.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a crazy strategy. They're the next round of casualties. So,
and that's what we're seeing around the world in places that haven't been very well prepared. And obviously many people won't be prepared for something like this, which is something we can come on to later, how we feel prepared for this. But I think as of yesterday, 45 healthcare workers in the UK have sadly died because of COVID-19. And in all honesty, hearing your story, I feel like you were very nearly another one of those statistics, based on your experience. So
Yeah, I
this
mean,
is
it was
really
pretty severe.
important,
Yeah,
because I think not only not only are we more exposed, it's the viral load, that we would be exposed to day in, day out, especially for those of us who are working in an ITU or in a hospital setting. But of
yeah.
course, it doesn't have to be just, it could be anyone.
Yeah, look, I think now we've got to the point where even just going to the supermarket, we're all playing Russian roulette. You know, this is an invisible virus. We don't know where it is. You can't see it, therefore you can't perceive your imminent danger or threat. So, I mean, we're all at risk of this, and anything you can do to protect yourself, protect your family, you know, try and create some good general health and immune resilience is going to be the best thing that you can invest in right now. You asked about my symptoms, and lots of people have been interested in how it
What
played out
happened?
over the days.
Yeah.
So let me tell you a bit about that. I was 16 days in total isolation, complete isolation. So when I first clicked that I had a problem, it was about 3 o'clock, and I started to get all shivery, and I thought, oh gosh, is that a fever? You know, I had chills. So I went straight up to my room, and that developed into a kind of 3-day fever. But to be honest, for the first 3 days, I was, as you do, you know, I was up in my bedroom isolating. I didn't come out, but I was working on my laptop and, you know, able to do things. I didn't feel too unwell until day 4. And that's when I developed the chest pain, the shortness of breath, that real tightness in my chest that's lasted. I still have some now. So day 4 it hit, and I think day 6 to day 12 for me were really the worst. I had that loss of smell, the chest pain was so tight, the difficulty breathing, even if I just moved on my bed. I had diarrhea, I had headaches, I had this really odd feeling in my skin, which was like it almost felt like there was some kind of poison running up and down my arms. My arms didn't feel like mine. They felt numb and cold. Like, you know, when somebody injects something through a vein and you get that cold sensation? I had that for quite some time. Loss of smell, body aching, you know, those kinds of things. So, and I think that's what most people are reporting, is some combination of those things. And yet, ironically, I didn't have a cough.
Isn't that interesting?
Bizarre. Yeah.
Yeah, there are
Bizarre.
so many interesting symptoms, and hopefully, as more time passes, we'll begin to understand why some people experience these things in different ways. Whether it's something to do with, I was reading up research into different blood types, different perhaps reactivation of other underlying viruses. Clearly, our own innate immune system. There's all sorts of different things at play, and we just don't really understand that much about it as yet. But it's interesting that you reported that sensation on your skin. A lot of people have said the same thing, or a feeling that something was bubbling underneath, or that they wasn't quite feeling right under the skin. So that's really an interesting one that's not talked about quite so much. But
Mm.
certainly the lack of smell and also the lack of taste. And I should also say that that's not necessarily just congestion. That's potentially something that's affecting the olfactory nerve, the nerve that affects our sense of smell. And
Yeah.
again, there's not really a clear understanding as to why that happens, but that's another thing that's definitely been really common in terms of symptoms.
Yeah.
Um,
And just to reassure your listeners, my sense of smell has come back. But, you know, all of those awful things, as quickly as you slip into it, you pull out of it. Which, you know, I want to talk about it, but I don't want to scare anybody, because it does resolve. And, you know, Gemma, what really kept me going is I had a friend. I called it Duncan's Daily Update. So he was about 4 days ahead of me. And I used my friend Debbie to tell me every day, how is Duncan? And when I was at my worst, really struggling with breathing and fever and, you know, really on the edge, Duncan was back up, sitting upright on his laptop. And I thought, that's a great sign. So in my mind, I knew in 4 days' time, that might be me. And so little things like that really helped, because there's a physical illness and recovery, but there's also an emotional and psychological aspect to this illness that you cannot underestimate. I consider myself relatively resilient, and a healthy 42-year-old, actually, despite my TB. You know me, I love health and wellness, and I live and breathe it, and my family, you know, we love being healthy. But this really tested me, because I think it's just the total loss of human touch and contact, the absolute isolation that you have to go through. You haven't got your family there cheering you on, encouraging you. You know, so it's very hard. So I kind of had to be my own cheerleader, and I developed this kind of these little rituals when I was in the room, because it's a very long day. So I used breathing techniques, meditation, positive self-affirmations, almost like a self-dialogue to myself every single day. You will be healthy again. You're strong. You'll get through this. Stay, you know, stay positive. So I almost had to talk myself and counsel myself through it, which seems odd, but that is the position that people are in because of this isolation issue. It's very difficult.
Yeah, well done, Joe. It sounds really difficult, and I think you're absolutely right. When you find yourself in the situation where you have to go deep inside to be able to get the strength to get through it, then giving yourself the gift of saying things that are positive, keeping sort of as positive as you can within that situation, and meditating and breathing is just it's an incredible tool, and it's probably at that time when you're at your lowest where it can be most useful.
Yeah, definitely. And also, anyone that's listening needs to understand the importance of breathing. So obviously we know this because we're both GPs, but people out there might not know. Whenever you get any respiratory illness, pneumonia, anything like that, breathing is really important. And by breathing, I mean deep breathing. You have to remember to get air right into the base of your lungs, right down here. Particularly with COVID as well. So any strategy or technique that you can do to really aerate your lungs right at the bases is really important, because what we're trying to prevent is your lung tissue collapsing and then you getting secondary bacterial infection. So I know you love breathing techniques as well, Gemma, but I use box breathing because it's just so easy. And I kind of imagine a box, and you start with a very long deep exhale, and then you breathe in for 5 seconds, you hold it for 5 seconds, you breathe out for 5 seconds, and you hold it. Or you can do kind of 8 seconds in, 8 seconds out, but anything to aerate the lungs. And at the same time, the other dual benefit is that breathing that deeply just helps calm you. If you're feeling anxious, which I definitely was, and I think there's lots of suppressed panic and anxiety out there in society right now, then deep breathing is such a great strategy for calming that anxiety that otherwise might overwhelm you. And just, you know, that adrenaline, cortisol driven anxiety. I think breathing is just wonderful. So it you know, it's free and it's effective.
Yeah, I love how you describe that. That's fantastic. And also I love how you start out with the out breath, which I think is also something that people really benefit from knowing, because when you're
Yeah.
trying to take a deep breath on lungs that are already full of air, it can actually, well, exacerbate the feeling of anxiety. What you really need to do is push the air out and then let it gently fall back into the belly. So I love that box technique that you did. That's fantastic. Did you also find it useful to lie on your belly at any stage? Because a lot of the exercises that people are talking about now suggest, especially given that it's helpful in the ITU setting for some patients, is lying prone. Rather than lying on your back. Did you find that particularly useful, or did you not do that?
Do you know what? When I was in my room, I actually had to say to my family, and do you remember I said to you, it got to a point where I was like, guys, I'm not going to listen to the news. I'm not going to read a medical paper. I can't. I've got to switch off. The COVID noise was affecting my mental health and made me feel so fragile. The more I read about it, the more fear and despair I felt. So I actually cut off from all of that. So I missed the importance of sleeping on your tummy when you're right in the middle of this, but I wish I'd known it in a way. I think it would have been helpful. What I did was I sat upright. So I often slept with about 5 pillows. And we know from tending patients who are short of breath in, you know, in an emergency situation, that you sit them up. It's much easier to breathe propped up. So I was using furniture to lean on, and, you know, I tried to sit upright. But I do believe that lying prone, so on your tummy, can help people as well. So that's definitely worthwhile information to share.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's quite useful because it's part of the exercises that you can do if say you've got the infection and you're feeling yourself becoming a bit short of breath. Simply lying on your belly, making sure that you've got enough space for your mouth and your face, and then doing the deep breathing in that position allows more aeration of the bottom alveoli of the lungs. So it's
Yeah.
a nice thing to do as part of your exercises if you're in that position right now. Say you've got the infection and you're wondering, well, how can I help my breathing? Lying flat on your belly, doing the deep breaths in, the deep breaths out,
Yeah, makes
and
sense.
also yeah, but you know, if it's not natural for you to lie on your belly during sleep, then obviously you don't have to do that. But it's another option, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um,
And one more
so
thing, actually, deep coughing, almost like your own
yeah,
DIY chest physio, deep coughing. So after doing a lot, you know, a few cycles of box breathing, couple of deep hacking coughs into a tissue throw out straight away, you know, alcohol gel your hands or wash your hands straight away. But that's almost like your own home physio for the chest, isn't it, to get that
yeah,
all that cough and gunk out.
yeah. In fact, it's yeah, it's a great tip. I saw an ICU nurse describe it as well. So you'd be lying on your belly, you do some lovely big deep breaths, 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out, or whatever whatever you find comfortable given your state of breathing at the time, and then end it, perhaps the fifth breath, with a really really deep cough,
Yeah.
and then repeat the exercise. And you can repeat that maybe 3 cycles, 3 times a day, just to kind of keep your lungs as open as possible. So that's a great tip to be taking away. Thank you, Joe. Um, and another great tip that you mentioned was to avoid the coronavirus overload, which I think, we're contributing to tonight, but hopefully in a positive way, giving you guys some great tips if you yourselves are getting and potentially getting the infection, is to think to yourself, I'm not going to become overwhelmed with all of the news and all of the negativity and all of the fear. Instead, as Joe has said, I'm just going to repeat to myself, I'm going to get through this. I am going to be healthy. I am feeling well. I am feeling as good as I can feel at this moment. I love myself. I love my body. I'm going to do my breathing now, and just focusing entirely on giving yourself what you need to get well. So the other questions that people had for you were around things like similar themes, really. I'll read the questions. So the first was, did the symptoms come in waves? And was it different from anything you felt before? I know you've already described some of the symptoms already. And also how you handled the fear. And again, you've touched on that briefly.
Yeah.
But yeah, the idea of the symptoms, how did you experience that? Was it something that came and went, or was it there constantly when it got particularly bad?
Uh, I'd love to say it came and went, but I'd be lying. I think from about day 4 and 5 onwards, it was pretty dense. The chest stuff felt heavy. I mean, I had an oxygen sat, little pulse oximeter in my room, and that gave me such reassurance. You can actually download apps to do the same. And I strongly recommend that if anyone gets unwell, download a oxygen saturation app. You put your finger on your smartphone and it can read with relative accuracy, actually, your oxygen level. So I found it incredibly reassuring. Do you remember I was texting you, Sat's okay, pulse okay, guess I'm
Mhm.
okay? But that's really important, because what we know from these kinds of this virus is that people seem to be doing okay in week 1, and I think week 2 seems to be critical. So you know, some people obviously move straight out and get better, and other people then it seems to linger and then can cause, you know, sudden deterioration. So having access to your numbers in terms of your pulse and your, you know, your oxygen levels are really important. So I think that really helped me. Yeah, the symptoms, I mean, my fever came in waves. It was always afternoon and evening, and I called them my dark hours, because people start to go to bed and night falls, and there's something, I guess, psychological about nighttime. And well, we all know from our years in A&E that often at nighttime, you know, people deteriorate. So that played on my mind a bit. So I tried to, again, meditate, breathe, distract myself, look at photos of people I loved. You know, I was doing anything really to distract myself from otherwise a little bit of misery that I could have indulged in. So the
Well,
symptoms were
it's okay, Joe, to feel it. I mean, you're going through something that's a huge crisis. It's okay, to, I suppose, acknowledge that it was, you know, it's the darkest of times. You know,
yeah, it was pretty dark. And I think, you know, I talked about this already, but my son summed up how it felt for the children as well, because it was hard for the whole family. But my children were crying behind the door, "Mummy, what's wrong?" And we were trying to really protect them from it. My husband didn't want to tell them too much in the beginning. It was only on day 6 that I went to hospital because I really deteriorated, and then I was confirmed as COVID positive. So then I knew. But my son said, and these words will haunt me forever. He said, "Mummy, I will stay inside forever if it means that you don't die." And you know, that's tough for young kids, isn't it? And you know, my family is no exception. There are families all around this country and world right now who are going through this experience, and it's quite terrifying for everybody in the family. And it's hard when, you know, people are seeing loved ones go to hospital in ambulances unaccompanied, to a destiny that they you know, it's just all so unknown. So, you know, I mean, I am praying for everybody every single day. I'm just morning and night. I'm praying for absolutely everybody that's out there that might be going through it right now. And our frontline workers are just incredible. The self-sacrifice they are showing is just, this is their highest work. And it's just so humbling that people will do this for the greater good of our nation and our globe and for humanity.
oh, Joe, yeah, I agree. And
Mm.
thinking about your son and his comment, I'm just wondering. I know it's early days, and you're still short of breath in some ways, and this has only just been a few weeks, really, 4 weeks now since it first began. How have the children been since you've been home?
Yeah, so much better. So once I came out at day 16, because I was told by the hospital microbiologist that my viral load was very high. So she said in no uncertain terms, stay in your room for longer. So I knew I couldn't come out. When I did come out, I continued with a mask, and I explained to the children that I did have COVID. They'd heard stuff. They knew Mummy was in the bedroom for so long. They knew something bizarre was happening. School had stopped abruptly. You know, everything that they knew that was normal for them has stopped. So we explained, you know, my 5-year-old, I missed her birthday. We kind of just rescheduled it. You know, so lots of cuddles, lots of reassurance. There's been lots of tears. You know, my son's acting out a little bit, but that's understandable. The 11-year-old was very quiet and detached when I first came out, but you know, it's just it's a slow recovery for us all on every level, you know, physical, emotional, spiritual. It's definitely been a journey.
I can see that. Yeah, I think it's incredibly heartening to know that, well, not only that you've been able to go back home, but that now you're also able to see your children again and give them the hugs that you've been longing to give them whilst you were
Oh,
not well.
it's
Um,
so wonderful.
yeah,
Yeah.
it makes you really appreciate what's so important in life, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I
Ooh.
made a list of things that I wanted to change about my life. And I've had, you know, 2 years ago, I was very poorly with pericarditis. So I didn't need a near-death experience to sort my life out again. But, you know, we all, even with the best
These bugs are out to
intentions.
get you, Joe. These bugs are out
Yeah,
to get you.
I know they are. Well, I've had 3 now and they come in 3, so I'm done.
That's it. You're done now.
Yeah, no, but I do think that, these experiences, they do make you pause and they make you reflect. And yeah, there's definitely some changes I will make. I think I kind of got very busy and I was burning the candle at both ends for a while. And I need to check in with myself a little bit more and have some more calm time. So that would be high on my agenda, reprioritizing calm time and just well, time with the family as well. We end up all so busy, don't we, and torn in so many different directions.
Mm. And is there something in particular that you feel that you have learnt from your experience, going through all of this? Is there anything particular that you want to take away from it?
Well, I think, like you say, I mean, I've had TB, I've had viral pericarditis only in the last 2 years, and now this. So I do think that there's a message for me, which is I need to look at my immunity. I was a cesarean baby, so I missed out on that inoculation through the birth canal, which we now know is very important and can set your kind of immune dial for life. And when I had TB, I had 9 months of quadruple therapy of very intense antibiotics. So I think my immunity needs some work, and I may consult a few specialists to try and work on that. So that's definitely something that I'm going to be working on this year, just to build myself back up. And, we both know that a lot of that starts in the gut.
Yes, it does.
Mhm.
And the benefits of a plant-based diet in terms of being able to feed our beneficial gut microbiome is great.
Yeah.
And it also helps, just to reassure people as well that although, Joe had a really traumatic experience, she's now through the worst of it. And many people only have very mild symptoms. 80% of us will have mild symptoms. And, those in hospital, if you've got 1, 2, 3 different diseases like heart disease or diabetes or if you're overweight, then that can contribute to severity. And luckily, things like eating plant-based will hopefully reduce the risk of some of these other illness factors coming into into the equation. So it's definitely a good time to reflect on overall health. And as Joe said, really thinking, this is the time to maximize our body and make sure that we're not drinking too much alcohol, perhaps, that we're looking
Yeah.
after ourselves, eating lots of fruits and veggies, and giving our bodies what they need really to keep us healthy. So that's a lovely thing to be taken away from it. Now, is there anything else that you want to share about your story personally before we come on to some of the questions around the medical questions people had?
No, but just tapping in with your theme there and food, I think there's a really good point to be made about food. And I've really, I mean, you know how much I love talking about food. I wrote a book about, food choices and how they can align with health. But food is our cellular fuel. It's the building blocks of our body and cells. So I really think that,
If anybody wants to buy Joe's book, you can get it on Amazon.
Thank you.
Superfoods
Yeah,
for
no,
super health.
I do think that we don't have a medicine right now. We don't have a vaccine right now, but we have food, and it's the building blocks of all cellular activity. So I think we can all use food to serve us positively and beneficially, and avoid gas station processed junk, avoid inflammatory foods. There's a saying, the whiter your bread the sooner you're dead. Just it's worth being mindful of how we can build ourselves up and dampen down disease with food choices, and just making smart food choices right now. So we're trying to eat an abundance of fruit, veg, nuts, seeds, legumes, that kind of thing, because we know that they serve you positively. They build immune resilience. Like you, I'm plant-based, and I just wouldn't have it any other way right now. When you're trying to build up your peak health and immune strength, that's the only diet I see as universally beneficial.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to make. And as you've said, having a healthy diet is not going to stop you from being exposed to the coronavirus. And as Joe's experienced, it's not going to stop you from getting
Mm.
unwell. But it does give you a really great foundation full of antioxidants, phytonutrients, fiber, and yeah, it's something that helps the planet as well. So that's just yeah, it's lovely.
But also it prevents comorbidities, which put you at a higher risk. So there is benefit right now in adopting a healthier diet.
Yeah.
Now's the time.
Now is the time, and why not? We're
Now's
all
the
thinking
time.
about being healthy. We're at home. We can start doing a few more home cooked meals, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Um, and I suppose just getting back to some of the research aspects, I was looking into why certain medications might be helpful, and trying to sort of bring that back to what in nature can do the same things. And it's interesting because zinc has been shown to help reduce viral load inside the cell. And what can help zinc get into cells? Well, zinc comes in things like nuts and seeds, but how does it get inside the cell? Well, there are certain things that can help it get through from the bloodstream into the cell, which are things like polyphenols,
Mm.
quercetin, catechins, which come from things like onions and berries, and green tea and matcha. And so, maximizing things like nuts and seeds and vitamin C from your citrus fruits and as I say, the berries and the onions, all these
Yeah.
are great, and they're all in a plant-based diet. So, why not maximize on these nutrients as well?
Yeah. Win-win.
Right, so somebody asked about whether chronic exposure put you at greater risk. Well, we've already kind of answered that question when we talked about healthcare professionals, because it does make sense that having an increased viral load would result from having like multitude of exposures, as you would do perhaps in a hospital ward if you didn't have the right protection. And it makes sense again that you're most likely to get it from someone that's in your family, around whom you are most of the time. So yes, I think chronic exposure would put you at greater risk, which is also why sort of fleeting exposures when you're walking past someone are probably far less likely to result in an infection. Although clearly the most important thing to do at this stage is the physical distancing and the hand washing, still above everything else. So the question that they had for you, Joe, was what effect does COVID-19 have on pregnant women, and is it different for pregnant women?
Yeah, okay. Well, this is an interesting question because obviously, if you're pregnant and you're out there right now, it's a difficult time. I can really sympathize with anyone living in a pandemic and being pregnant. So, I think first things first, if you're fit and well, there doesn't appear to be any extra risk. Obviously, if you have comorbidities, like my TB was a definite comorbidity. So, I consider myself a healthy 42-year-old, but I had lung disease that was treated for 9 months. So I want to reassure people that, there's lots of people that have recovered. There's lots of people who've had this mildly, and hopefully if it comes to you and your immune system is good, you will fight a good fight, and you'll pass through it. If you have things like gestational diabetes, so diabetes to do with being pregnant, or preeclampsia and things like that, they will certainly put you in a higher risk category because they're high risk states anyway in pregnancy. But the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists in the UK believes there's no evidence that COVID-19 will pass to your baby, and has been giving the advice that there's no increased extra risk. I'd caveat that by saying, however, that in your third trimester, there's a lot more strains on your body, particularly in terms of breathing, because
Breathing.
you've got this, extra weight in the
The
abdominal
diaphragm's
region.
being splintered by the baby.
Yeah, so, if you're in your third trimester and you're worried, I would certainly talk to occupational health at work. I would talk to your GP, reach out, do whatever you can to be socially distant but emotionally connected. Maybe see if you can work from home. I think most
Yeah,
employers would
pregnant
be
women,
as,
pregnant women
you
in
know,
their yeah, that they've been
Yeah.
advised that they should be avoiding the workplace for that reason at this time.
Absolutely. And most people right now are being so thoughtful and compassionate and understanding, and we are all trying to protect one another. So, you know, I think if you have any concerns, reach out. I think the other thing that the risk is coming from perhaps is that because of this social isolating, people might be missing their antenatal appointments. So that might be kind of something
Yeah.
that, you know, will play into extra risk. So I would say to people, you know, the appointments are going ahead often over the phone and things like that, but it's still well worth keeping up with all your routine antenatal appointments. And midwives are coming into the home, I understand, if
Yeah.
people have extra risks. So,
No,
you
they
know,
are.
don't panic. You will get good care. You just need to reach out and engage with it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. And also, sort of thinking about the immunity side of things, pregnant women generally have a slightly lowered immune system because they're growing the baby, and they want, I mean, this is the logic that you're growing a baby, so your body has to aim to not reject that baby because half of its genetic material is not yours.
Mm.
And I don't know if that's the reason. That seems to make logical sense, but I know that, you know, I'm somebody that very rarely becomes unwell, but I definitely had a cold or two, especially in my first pregnancy. So perhaps that's also part of the reason, is the sense of the fact that pregnant women may have a slightly lowered immunity compared to what they normally would.
Mm. But on the positive, pregnant women often eat really well, nourish themselves, and flourish because of that, because they're eating well. They don't smoke, and they often don't drink either. So
Yeah.
maybe they kind of balance each other out in some way. And often women who are pregnant are taking like a Pregnacare supplement, aren't they? So they might be correcting any zinc deficiency or vitamin D deficiency that you know they may have had otherwise. So
Yeah, absolutely. And coming neatly on to the next question, because there was a question about vitamin D. Could increasing vitamin D help with COVID-19 patients, and why is that not being done in hospital? Is the question.
right, well, vitamin D is a very important vitamin. We traditionally thought that it was all about muscle and bone health. But in the last 15 to 20 years, an awful lot of research has come to the surface about the importance of vitamin D for our immune function and also preventing things like cancer as well. So vitamin D is a very important issue. Now, globally, there's about 1 billion people in the world that are suboptimal with their vitamin D. So it's a global human issue. In the UK, we are advised by Public Health England between the months of September and May to take a vitamin D3 supplement. And that's because in our climate, we don't see enough sunshine in those months to allow us to manufacture vitamin D, because 90% of our vitamin D we make ourselves from the sunshine that we're exposed to. So yes, vitamin D is a long-term strategy, but the thing is, by February, March time, most Brits are woefully low in vitamin D. So you don't want to be low in vitamin D when a pandemic hits. So it's very, very worthwhile to supplement vitamin D3, you know, throughout those months that you might not be getting decent sun exposure.
Yeah, I agree. I tend to tell most of my patients to take about 2,000 units a day, which is above the national recommendations, just because I feel like it's an important thing for all of us
Agreed.
to consider.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Now, what else? Oh, somebody was asking about cystic fibrosis and COVID-19. I know that you haven't had any particular experience of patients with cystic fibrosis. What I would say is that if you have cystic fibrosis, you would unfortunately be at higher risk if you were to develop the infection. So you would be, I would say, in the shielding group. It's better for you not to be exposed to this virus, full stop. Interestingly, in those who are severely affected, the cytokine storm and the lung damage that can sometimes occur in that circumstance looks a little bit like fibrosis when people are having CT scans. So it's interesting to see how this can affect certain proportions of the population, and we don't yet know the long-term consequences of that. But yeah, I'd say if you're interested in knowing about cystic fibrosis and the risk, I think it's safe to say that you would definitely be in a higher risk category, unfortunately. Another interesting thing that I found, actually looking at some of the studies from Wuhan, was that some of those that deteriorated quite severely had overgrowth of Prevotella, which is one of our really healthy commensal bacteria. So, and that happens with cystic fibrosis as well, that you have an overgrowth of what we'd normally consider to be fairly beneficial, or certainly not pathogenic, bacteria. So yeah, again, it's worth avoiding infection if you can help it, if you have cystic fibrosis, and otherwise just generally having lots of healthy things to eat, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds and legumes.
Yeah.
So I think, my goodness, there's only one more question or two more questions. So the question that was asked a few times was about children. Now, we all are now familiar with the fact that children are less affected, but the person wants to know, could it be damaging to their long-term health if they were to get COVID-19?
Great question. Unfortunately, this is an emerging science. We are literally, hitting the ground running here. It's far too early for us to know what the long-term consequences of COVID-19 are going to be in adults, vulnerable adults, those with pre-existing lung conditions, children. We just don't know. It's all so new, so much. So much is still anecdotal. There haven't been clinical trials. In medicine, we always try to be evidence-based, and by that we mean that we try and take out bias, and we try and create studies that remove any bias, and we control groups and compare them. So right now we just don't have that kind of science to rely on. I think, given that children seem to be having, if they get COVID, relatively mild symptoms, one would hope that this doesn't result in any long-term damage to the lungs. I would imagine that mainly the damage will be to the lungs. But we have seen people who've had some kidney damage, liver damage, people who've been very unwell in intensive care. We are seeing liver, kidney involvement, multi-organ involvement. So I think on the whole, if it's mild or moderate, we would hope that most of us make a really good full recovery. But to be honest, we just don't know. And that's part of the anxiety for everybody, is the unknown.
Yes. It's interesting. I mean, I do want to reassure people, though, that when it comes to children, they do tend to be far less affected, and they're more likely to carry the virus, in a sense. They can become infected, but they just don't have the symptoms that grown-ups do. So on the whole, that's
absolutely. Look, my children lived with me, at one point with a very high viral load, and they've all been absolutely fine. My husband was fine as well, and they're all close contacts. We would have had, would have had, so much exposure, and they were all fine. It's the reason why I wanted to isolate really strictly as well, and for so long, but they were fine. I mean, if they had it, it was mild. So we'll never know.
No. Well, we may know if there's an antibody test that's accurate, but again, that's very much up in the air as to whether that would be accurate, whether the antibodies stay around, whether we have lifelong immunity. We just don't know any of that stuff either, unfortunately. All right. Well, I think that's pretty much come to the end. Thank you so much, Jo. It was absolutely lovely to speak to you. And I'm so happy that you're feeling better.
Me too.
Yeah.
Thank you. Me too.
Have you got any last thoughts for our lovely people that have joined us tonight? We've had loads of people listening in. Thank you all so much. I can see, I think we went up to about 90 people at one time, which is just lovely. So thank you all for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it. And Jo, have you got any last words of wisdom?
Empower people and give it back, and throw some reflection on this. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I know you have too, Gemma, but what can we do to prevent this happening to humanity over and over again? I mean, the World Health Organization has said that the two greatest threats to humanity are climate change and emerging infectious diseases. We are living in an era where these two things are moving closer and closer to us, and if we don't act now and do something, it may be too late, and the future pandemics could be so much worse. So, I mean, some simple things would be, you know, trying to treat animals as our equals, trying to protect their habitats and their health, trying not to abuse them. You know, we all know that zoonotic diseases have, you know, whether it's bats, pigs, chickens that we're eating, they have all created zoonotic diseases in the past, and we need to learn our lessons. There's a huge demand in the world for animal protein, but in all of this, we have to learn that the more we deforest the land, the more we, you know, cause urban spread, the more we abuse our animals and we don't protect their habitats and their health, the more likely this can happen to us over and over again. And we have to be accountable for that. And we have a chance now. I really hope as a society and a world, we can reflect on what has happened and make some really important and big changes.
Yeah, Joe, that's lovely. I couldn't have put that better. And I suppose as well, given your personal experience, I guess it's even more of an important mission that you've taken. So, oh my goodness. Well, thank you so very much. And thank you to every single one of you who joined us tonight. I'm just scrolling through. There are so many names.
There's a lot of love, Gemma.
No, there's so much love here. And before I sign off, I'm just going to say, CrazyBird65 says, thank you for such insightful information, delivered in a calm, informed manner. Stay safe, and thank you both. Thank you. Thank you for doing this. Oh, people have been so lovely. Joe, I really appreciate all this. Get well soon, Joe.
Oh, thank you, everybody. And thank you for listening. And, you know, thanks for your prayers, because you know, I'm feeling a lot better, and I am proof that you can go very low with this, but also come out and a month later feel almost back to normal.
Yeah, exactly. It's very reassuring. Oh, and there's one more question here. Does it matter if you get most of your veggies cooked or raw? Well, I'll quickly answer that. Yeah. Raw vegetables have got a lot more phytonutrients that don't and the enzymes that can help you to get them into your body don't denature, so that's great. However, having said that, cooked veggies also have a lot of great benefits too. So for example, tomatoes, they have more lycopene if they're cooked and for a long time, so there's no harm in having them both ways. But the more fresh fruits and vegetables that you have, the better. Yeah. And gynecologist Dr. Neetu Bajikal has asked, hi guys, did your family get tested later to see if they were immune, as COVID is so infectious and maybe they had milder asymptomatic infection? Well, as Jo said, she couldn't get tests for her family, not even symptomatic family members, as far as I understand it. So, yeah.
No, I mean, we don't have a test right now. So the only test I had was the nasal and the throat swab, which showed that I was COVID positive.
Yeah. All right, Jo. And I think that your points about zoonotic diseases, i.e. diseases that are caused by our interaction with animals, brings me, who are watching this, fancy learning more about lifestyle and plant-based nutrition and how it can help your health. And it's the perfect opportunity to head on over to Plant-Based Health Professionals UK and then check out that Zoom call. I think there's going to be an hours worth of CPD there as well for you guys. So yeah. And that's it from me and from Jo. So thank you for joining us. Thank you so much. I love all those little hearts.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.